Leaders, can I ask you something? Have you noticed how heavy leadership feels right now? Retention is fragile, burnout is real, teams are tired. The language, it actually keeps changing. Is it trauma-informed, healing-centered? Is it all about belonging? But underneath all of that terminology, there's one central question. How do we create environments where people can actually thrive and still get results? Yeah, because here's the truth of it. When your teams walk into the workplace, they don't clock in as empty vessels. They bring their stories, their stressors, their caregiving responsibilities, their grief, and their brilliance. And if we pretend that leadership is just about strategies and deliverables, we will miss the heart of the matter, the most important thing. And that's why this conversation is necessary. It's needed right now. In times of uncertainty and scarcity and change, culture, it's not soft work, it's survival work. Belonging, it's not just a buzzword, it's a retention strategy. Healing-centered leadership is not lowering your expectation, it's raising capacity. If you are leading educators or youth service organizations, nonprofits, or corporate teams, anywhere people matter, then you cannot afford to ignore how humanity intersects with performance. Tonight's conversation is about strengthening the village. I know. We've all heard that term, but it's about supporting the nurturers who are often the most depleted. It's about operationalizing care in a way that actually drives results, not excuses. So if you want to build your culture that actually lasts, if you want to lead with both integrity and impact, if you want your organization to thrive, not just survive, then this is the conversation for you. I want you to lean in because this isn't just talking about theory. This is leadership that's necessary right now. So let's get at it here on the flip side. Making strong leaders in this season. Leadership is influence. It's rooted in the responsibility you take. You pay attention to the patterns, your calm, your strength, your hope. It's all integrated. We are living in a time where trust is fragile and people are watching not just what leaders say, but how they decide. Integrity is not optional anymore. Obedience is going to cost you. In this season, we're not just flipping adversity. We're forming leaders who can carry what comes next. Leaders from across all dimensions of fields and spaces. They're going to come together to give you the best of their wisdom. And I want you to leave each episode with a call to action. That's the work. That's the calling. And that's the conversation we're stepping into together. I am so excited to be able to introduce this leader to our conversation. This is conversation number 5 of 47. I've made a commitment in 2026 to be able to lean into leaders from all over the country as well as the world who are creating impact and actually doing the thing, not just talking about theory, but doing the work. And this leader is a true example of that. Let me tell you a little bit about her. Bridgett Hitchings is an educator, social worker, and advocate with over 20 years of experience empowering youth and leaders that serve them. A people-first, results-oriented leader, she has served as a teacher, a dean, a principal, and a program director. bringing a nuanced perspective to youth development and team culture. As the founder and CEO of Maggie's Village LLC, she partners with schools and youth serving organizations to build leadership capacity, strengthen systems, and create affirming environments where young people and the communities around them thrive. So join me in welcoming to the flip side of adversity, Bridgett Hitchings. Yes. Come on in the room. Hey, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited to have this conversation because I have encountered so many leaders who are carrying heavy weight. Some of it is not their responsibility to carry, but some of it they need to become more self-aware on choices and decisions that they are making that impacts culture and climate. And I truly value your perspective on this conversation. So welcome to the flip side.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. I'm so happy to be here. And this is a conversation that is very close to my heart. So I'm very happy to be in community and conversation with you about it today.
Yes. So you have worked, I just went through the list of all of the different roles and experiences that you've had. I want to start off by actually asking, how do you define belonging in the context of a healing community or culture?
Yeah, so I like to use the definition that Jeffrey Cohen stars. It's one of my favorites. And belonging is the feeling that we're part of a larger group that values, respects, and cares for us, and to which we feel like we have something to contribute. And so to me, it really is a reciprocal relationship, right? It's this place that, like, oh, you actually care about me as a person, like you said, not just the bottom line, and I can contribute. Like, I don't just come in to like do a thing, but I also help to make this place better. I can see my value, as well as knowing that others here see my value and I see theirs.
Yeah, so we see the person feels seen and they understand how they fit into the culture and add value to it. I know in this season and time where there are so many things that could be distracting leaders, and sometimes we can get so caught up in trying to catch up that we think that things like belonging, healing centered, listening, psychological state, like we just need to get the thing done. Yeah. I'm curious, where in your career did you actually realize that belonging wasn't just a nice thing, but it actually was an essential thing?
It's really interesting because I realized belonging was essential before I knew what belonging was. And I only realized it was essential until when I got to a place where belonging didn't exist. And so I was cultivated both as a young person and as in my college. I went to a HBCU, and there were so many places where belonging was the norm. And so I just like, oh, this is just a way of being. And so it's just like a normal thing. And then I got into places where it wasn't, and I felt like I was an alien. I will often say, like, I feel like I'm on a planet that I don't speak the language here. And it wasn't until I could step back from that and piece all of those things together along my journey where I started to notice that, like, oh, when you really do build community, when people really do feel connected, they thrive. And I would tell leaders often that when you are doing leadership right, when you invest in your people and they believe in you, they will walk through fire with you. When you don't, they got the list of like, is this on my job? Oh, that's not in my job description. That's not it, right? And so it becomes this very transactional thing. And so when we treat the people like they are the transactions, then that's what you get. You get transactional things, and you really don't get a ownership of the shared goals we should have in accomplishing what we want to in our roles and our jobs and our places.
Yeah, that opportunity to really allow people to recognize that feeling seen is a part of a leadership strategy and culture building. So oftentimes when I'm working or I'm asked to come in with a team, they want the quick checklist, but you're talking about deeper work than a checklist.
I
And
tell people all the time, there is no script. There's no script. There are guidelines, but there is no script.
And there's something really interesting because we were having a whole conversation off camera before we even went live. And I actually want to insert something you said, because a leader will have us come in and say, you know what? I want our culture to become better. I need us to, it's that staff person in cubicle B2. And if you could help me figure out how to get them to behave better, our culture would be better. But you said something off camera that I think leaders need to really understand. When we're talking about doing culture work, is it really about the staff person in B2?
No, it really is about the leader. I tell every coaching client when we do that consultation, and because that's where it is. And I get it comes from a genuine place, right? It's because because honestly, if they really thought it was about the person wouldn't be there. If the person in and of themselves was problematic, they do add some value, because if they didn't add any value, then they wouldn't be there. But what I tell people is that, one, who you are impacts how you lead, and how you lead impacts the environment of the people that you lead. And so when you come and say, I want you to fix my people, I say, oh, no. This work is self-work. So we go work on you as a leader, not the people that you serve. And so if you want to do this work, if you are committed to it, you have to start inside first and see how you lead is impacting the culture. Because a lot of times those things, for people who work for young people, what I often say is that young people are not the thermostat, they are the thermometer. And so when you are a leader, the same thing happens when you work for an adult. When you see things in your culture that don't sound right, that's your thermometer giving back to you what the environment is. You are the thermostat. And if you're not the thermostat in your organization, the thing that controls the temperature, then anything goes. And so you are the reason that the temperature is going up, because you haven't taken ownership of it.
That can be a hard pill for leaders to swallow, especially when there's so much coming at them.
Yes.
And so it also sounds like, as a leader, I can't do this work empty.
Yes, you can't do it empty, and you can't do it alone. Because when you think that you have to fix others, you think you have to, it's almost like the Wizard of Oz. You got to go behind this curtain, you got to do these little magic things that people can't see, and you come back with the fix. But if you really are building community, everybody gets to be invested in the way forward. And then you get this diversity of ideas and experience, and you really get a chance for people to live out their strengths. That takes a load off a leader. Some of that beginning work might be because you need to know your people. And if you don't know your people, you really can't bring them together. So that work of knowing your people is important, but then you actually get to share that load with them. And therefore it's not as heavy for you.
Yeah. The only way that I can truly see you is if I took the time to know you. And that leads the pathway to this conversation of belonging. And so I shared in the social media posts leading into this, which some people may have been like, what? Because I'm a certified trauma trainer. Yes. You pulled apart the conversation of there's a shift from trauma informed to healing centered. And First of all, I want you to create the bridge between belonging and healing centered, and
Yes.
then unpack how is this shift happening between healing centered and trauma informed, because I'm looking at the people in the chat and they are certified trauma informed folk, and so they're like,
Yes.
wait a minute. So
Yes.
let's walk us through it.
So first, I'm going to say that being trauma informed is not the end. Okay, but we want to look at a way to elevate that. And so, on one hand, when you connect healing center to belonging, because belonging is about honoring the humanity of the people. And so that's what healing centered is. It is about centering humanity, not asking people to leave their humanity at the door in order to do the work of the business. And so that is the heart of it. We could go into more details about it. And before trauma informed care, the question was, what's wrong with you? Right. And then with trauma informed care, we ask the question about what happened to you, which is an important question. Unfortunately, if we stop there, we center the trauma. Everything about how we show up in a place is regarding the trauma, but people's traumas are not their whole story. And so what we want to do is ask a different question of like, what's right with you? So healing centered practices are strengths based. We have an awareness of how trauma impacts how people show up in the world, but even those who are experiencing and still carrying the remnants of trauma in their life, they still have strengths. And so if we only focus on the trauma and we ignore the strengths, then we're actually not doing service to those people. And we're also not doing service to our organizations. And if you're working with young people, you're not doing the service to the young people. Who wants to be known only by the worst thing that ever happened to them? Right. And so we want to acknowledge that if these things happened, then they are going to impact how you show up in the world. There are things that we might need to be aware of, but we don't want to center that. We don't want that to drive how we engage with you fully. We want to know that that is a layer, and we want to continue to pull back other layers to find out your strengths and how those strengths impact how you show up in the world.
So I'm wondering whether or not there's some leaders who are actually getting nervous about this conversation because they're scared that, okay, so does healing center then mean I'm responsible for people getting healed or feeling healed or showing up healed? So what's their level of responsibility in a healing centered environment?
That's a great question. One, no. So the first question is no, it's not your responsibility. We're not asking you to have any extra letters behind your name to help people deal with whatever's going on in their life. But there are two responsibilities as a leader. One, the responsibility is to not cause additional harm, right? And even if you have the best of intentions, you can cause harm. And so there is some unpacking work for you to do to see if you are causing harm. And then your second responsibility is to make sure your environment is conducive to self-healing. Because the thing is, people oftentimes know what their needs and what they need, especially if you're talking about adults, right? But if it's an environment that is stressed all the time, if it's an environment where they don't feel safe, it's an environment where they don't feel connected, then that's not a place where they can actually do the work that they need to do individually to heal, right? They have to leave it at the door, right? And so if we have an opportunity where we are not causing additional harm, and so therefore we have an environment that is conducive for people to be well, then you are doing the right thing as a leader to incorporate healing centered practices.
So I want to lean in because if I want to create an environment that reflects the opportunity for people to find connection, to build relationship, to feel seen, to understand their purpose. As a leader, what do I need to become more aware of about myself or how I'm leading that will impact whether or not that's the space that they're coming into?
Well, one thing, you need to know your own triggers, right? And so if you are Because sometimes what I found with the leaders that I've worked with is that that person that you mentioned, that's that thorn in their side that they want me to come fix, it ain't nothing wrong with that person. It's just that person is triggered. That person reminds you of something, or that person is right up in the middle of your pet peeve. And so because they are in the middle of your pet peeve, you are very much triggered by them. Or because I have this singular view of what professional looks like. I have this singular view of what is the strengths that are necessary to do a particular role. And when people show up differently, we interpret it as wrong. And so some of that self-work is understanding, what are my values? What are my triggers? What do I believe about people? What do I believe about how people should be under my leadership? Like, what are my leadership styles? And so part of it, if I feel like I'm the type of leader that says, leadership is I tell you what to do and you do it, and I have this person who like, well, and not only I tell you what to do and you do it, but and I tell you how to do it, and I have this other person like, well, that way don't work for me. I can get this done, but I'm gonna do it this way. And now you in your feelings about it. Even if they got the job done, then you see that person as the problem. But if you do the work to figure out, what do I value, what am I triggered by, then you actually position yourself to see people in their wholeness versus through your lens of harm or your lens of hurt or whatever else may be blocking what you see. And the actions that you see might be a response to you versus a part of their identity.
That you just stepped on somebody's toes, because if the staff person in B2 is responding from something that I am radiating, then this means it starts with me, and I might not feel like I'm ready to look in the mirror. And the harder work, the actual responsibility of leadership is that I'm continuously willing to be reflective, to look in the mirror, to hold integrity. One of the very first conversation in this series was with Dr. Danny Martin, who I have been trying to connect you with. Just side note. Okay. But Dr. Danny Martin, she said her mentor said, you as a leader should be able to wake up every morning and look in the mirror and say, good morning, integrity. And that like sits with me. So as leaders, that connection to integrity also means that I need to be willing to do the work first before I ever expect anyone else to do work.
Absolutely. And you know, the unfortunate part, and this is one of the reasons that I love, it's a little off topic, but on topic. One of the reasons that I love leadership is that I have a heart for leaders. So even the leaders whose toes feel like they're stepped on, chances are they are a leader who moved up the pipeline. And somebody said, I'm gonna go to the school setting. Somebody said, you know what, you're real good at teaching little kids to lead the English department. And those are very different skills. And then you figure out the English, you know what, you should be the AP. And those are very different skills. And don't nobody give you the rule book. They don't try to coach you. They're like, you just real good. And then one day it's like, she used to be so good. I wonder what happened to her. And so we don't pour into leaders, especially strong leaders. We don't pour into them because we have this faith that they can figure it out. But again, when you talk about the nurturers don't get nurtured, it's like, no, if it's a continuously learning process for the people that you lead, then you also have to be on this continual learning process as well. And so what happens is, you don't, because I'll be honestly, when I first became a leader coming out of the classroom, I was like, okay, listen, I get it. Kids, I get it. Why you grow and you having all these issues? But the reality of it is they people too. They're just bigger people. They're just bigger people. And I understood that as a high school leader and as a high school teacher, that I used to have a training about why, ninth graders and 2-year-olds, they have very similar ways of being, right? And why do we give so much grace to 2-year-olds that we don't get to ninth graders? Because 2-year-olds look like babies, and ninth graders start growing facial hair and they stink. They start looking like adults. They got deep voices. And so we don't give them that grace. But the same thing happens with adults, right? This idea that you've reached adulthood. And so you should just know all of the things like magically, but we don't know people's stories. We don't know this thing that they feel very strongly about might come from a very good place. And there may be a way for you to cultivate that as a leader if you are willing to take the time to get to know them. If you are willing to know your people and what they bring to the table, then you are positioning yourself to be able to cultivate those strengths. And then get the work done that you actually do value as the most important thing. But if you try to step over the people to get it, the people mad, you mad, and the work not getting done. And then what?
So you are speaking your own truth. Is it literally in your bio you identify yourself as people first, but then you also say and you're results oriented. And I've heard leaders say, focusing on these people, it's a time suck. I need us to get to ABC. So some leaders see those two concepts as actually competing priorities.
Mhm.
How do you operationalize
Mhm.
care without beginning to compromise accountability?
Yeah, so I'll start first with that's the results are the what, the people are the how. And so too often people look at the people work is the what. It's like another task. It's like no, of the tasks that you're doing, how are you doing it in a way that cultivates community and connection and getting to know your people. And so for me those things they go hand in hand. They aren't different things because it's not because those people who see them as different things thinks they're like, oh, I need to host a pizza party or we need to do birthday celebrations or there's this very performative way of connection and community that people want to do, but it's really the like natural way that we connect as humans. And sometimes just saying good morning, and when you say how are you doing, you actually wait to hear what they say and you care, and you do care what the response is. And so I think that the lens that people have to look through it is not as a checklist, but a way of being. And so
Mm.
how do I get to this way of being and how I engage with the people within my community, my work community, that allows us to all thrive, like all of us to show up and as our best selves in the conditions that we're in to move towards the results, because that's ultimately what we want. We want people to be able to sit in their strengths to a way that connects with the strengths of the people next with them and connects with the strengths of the leaders. And then therefore you reach the results that you were trying to reach. There's so much intentionality in the what, but sometimes the how gets lost, and that's where you
Mm-hmm.
lose people.
Mm-hmm. And so let's break that how down.
Mhm.
When you're talking about a healing centered practice,
Yep.
what are the things that need to be implemented immediately?
Know yourself and get to know your people, right? And so those are the first things, because that allows you to decide how you want to show up, and what things matter to them. I think if you are a leader who never has, like, I believe that, and the size of the organization can matter, so it might be your team and not your whole organization, but at least twice a year, depending on what your work looks like. And in some cases, this is could be weekly or monthly. You need to have one-on-ones with people. And those one-on-ones are really about the work, like how are we getting the work done? And in that, getting to know people. You
Mhm.
get to know parts of their stories. And therefore you can find out how do they fit into the larger picture of this organization. Because what you also might find out is that there are strengths that you're not tapping into. You never consider what they might be bringing to the table. So I think that part is important. I think it's also important to acknowledge harm. The reality of it is sometimes we are so ashamed of things that we did when we didn't know any better that we won't step forward to do better when we know better. And so if you didn't know better, but now you do and you want to do better, acknowledge it. Acknowledge if there was harm that you caused, or if the environment is just a little toxic, let's acknowledge it. We don't have to gaslight people. Some of the work that we do is really hard. Like in education is really, really hard right now for a plethora of reasons. we don't have to pretend like it is. And we don't have to pretend like we don't have to treat people like they don't care when they acknowledge how hard it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if
Mm-hmm.
they're still showing up, if they're still trying to do right by young people, then we want to acknowledge that, like, yes, it's hard. We want to figure out how can we lessen the hard, but we want to acknowledge that some of this hard is outside of control and it won't change. How do we make sure this hard doesn't harm us individually and collectively? And so those are some of the things that you want to start with, because you got to name it. Because the reality of it is, the meeting after the meeting, they absolutely talking about it. They absolutely, they are absolutely naming the things. You just not a part of the conversation.
Yes. And that can lead us into this whole conversation of toxic positivity, right? So,
Yeah.
not acknowledging not only what might be happening in the organization, inside the people, but I think even just what people are carrying into the space. I was walking into a training and I truly asked the leader, like, how are you doing? And she paused and she was like, it is really hard today. And just acknowledging that there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of stuff, and not that we have to allow it to consume us, but we do have to allow it to be said and aired. So
Mm-hmm.
powerful.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you two examples, not related to each other, but connected to it. So one is in one of my buildings that I worked in my office, purple is my favorite color, and I had a purple couch and purple walls. But anyway, I would say, come sit on a purple couch. I don't know if there is one person that I coach that has not cried on that couch. And the reality of it is, and I tell people, some people are so afraid of tears. I was like, but it's really just a human experience. But the tears doesn't stop. Like, even if the tears are because I'm telling you something hard, I'm going to give you space to cry. And then we're going to deal with the hard, because I don't see that as weakness in you. If things, you can deal with the hard, but also we're not going to weaponize these tears either. The tears
Right.
won't stop you from dealing with the hard, right? And so I think that that's just something that allowed people to realize, like, it's okay to be human here. But the other thing that was really a powerful experience I had just this past summer was working with the organization and some leaders. And we came in and had one-on-one conversations with the leaders. We were helping them to do some prevention for child abuse and thinking about strategies and things that they could put in place. And so in all of our one-on-ones, we do the, like, how are you? How are the days going? And one of the leaders said, no one ever asks me how I'm doing. And I was like,
Wow.
oh my goodness, how do you show up in a place every day and do this important hard work and no one actually acknowledges your humanity, even as a leader? And so for me, it was just this resounding reminder that we have to center humanity. And it doesn't take long just to say, how are you doing? And for
Mm.
people to say it's hard, sometimes they just need to acknowledge it. They're not even asking you to fix it. They just need to acknowledge it so that they don't have to hold it. It's like if you try to hold it in, it creates so much stress and tension in your body. And then that becomes your focus rather than the focus of the work. But if you can release it, then you can refocus and do the work. If you know that it's something I have to deal with, and I know I'm alongside people and somebody actually cares, okay, thank you. Thank you for giving me this moment of reset so I could go back and do what I came here to do. And that just doesn't cost a lot from a time perspective, but it does cost a lot from a humility perspective, from an integrity perspective, from a values perspective.
You I think there's something in what you just said, because I know that sometimes people, especially leaders, are worried that if I let them tell me what is on their heart, what is bothering them, what the pressure is, somehow there's an unspoken expectation that I have to do something about it. So they tend not to allow that space because I can't fix it. And therefore, I don't even want to create the time or the space for them to be sharing it because I can't do anything about it.
Yeah. I think that unwritten expectation exists in their own head. Right. And so I even have people in my personal relationships who I have to say, like, just because I named this problem, if I don't ask a question for you to fix it, then I don't have an expectation that you do. And sometimes you might not even be equipped to fix this. And so by you trying to do so, then you are actually causing more harm. And
Yeah.
so empathy is not about being the fixer. And sometimes, and I've told leaders this gently, but when they say certain things, I was like, that is your arrogance popping up. You are centering yourself in someone else's story. Just because they shared their story with you does not mean they're asking you to be a main character in it. And so empathy means that I can hold this with you. I can stand with you while you are on this journey, but I don't have to be the main character in the story.
I oh. She said that is your arrogance showing up. I don't think I have ever heard someone um, phrase it that way, and thinking about it in that way would absolutely hold a leader accountable to stepping back and taking the role. I'm literally just listening and holding space, so that I stay humble and not insert myself into this story. Wow. Oh, mm, mm, mm. So, as a consultant, you shared how you work with leaders. When you
Mhm.
enter into an organization and your role as a consultant is to support this like culture change, what are some key things? You've already said that you tell the leader we're starting with you, but what are some other key things as a consultant that you walk organizations through to shift culture?
One of the things we do are listening sessions. I want to know what your people say about this organization. What do they say about working with you? So that can look like 360s, that can look like me doing one on one conversation or focus groups. Because the reality of it is, another thing that I do require for my coaching clients is that if I am doing the work with you, it's not just going to be in meetings like this. It's not just going to be me and you meeting face to face. I need to see you in action, because the reality of it is, if we only meet, everything I hear is through your lens. However, if your lens is the problem,
Mhm.
then the solutions I'm offering actually won't address the problems that you're seeing. And so being able to be open and honestly vulnerable like that is going to be required. And so being able to hear what people are saying, being able to acknowledge and address it. Which of these things are surprising to you? Which of these things are like, yep, I knew it, I just didn't know what to do about it? And then we can actually start a plan based on what is happening within your organizations. And leaders can do that themselves. There are some leaders who have decent relationships with the people that they serve. However, they never show their own humanity. And so if you don't show your own humanity, then people don't feel like they can show theirs, or they don't feel like they can approach you. And so if they don't feel like they can approach you, they may respect you as a leader. They may consider you a fair person. They may consider you very competent and maybe even nice, but they might not think that you care about their opinion. And if they don't think that, then they're not going to give it to you. But if you ask, you put yourself in a position to say, I care, I want to hear, you can have those conversations. In more toxic places where people, I won't even use the word toxic. Sometimes it's toxic, but sometimes it's just they haven't cultivated safety. They don't have a culture of feedback. And so if you don't have a culture of feedback, then people don't say anything, and because it doesn't feel safe. And sometimes people don't feel safe because of their prior experience, because sometimes feedback has been weaponized. And so if you want to create and cultivate a culture of feedback, it starts with you. And a lot of times it starts with you by asking people to give you feedback. And then when they give it to you, if it is something that you can't address, address it and let them know that I hear you. This is what I heard. This is what I'm going to do about it. And that's how you build trust. Because the worst thing is to ask people, what do you see as a problem? What do you think needs to fix? And be like, thanks for letting me know. All right, business as usual. Let's keep it moving.
There's
And
so
like, I
many.
asked the questions.
Right. There's so many clients who will send out these surveys, and then I ask, so what did you do with it, and how did you share back that you heard them? And they will pump out survey after survey after survey and collect this data, but there is no intentional way that they are sharing it back, that they're communicating, this is what we heard, and this is what we're able to change, and even communicating the things that they can't change, but recognizing that we heard you.
Yes.
Ugh.
And people appreciate that too. They can acknowledge, like, we do this thing that you may not like, but here is the rationale. Because oftentimes leaders know so many layers behind the curtain, and you don't necessarily have to show all of them layers, but the curtain shouldn't be right at the front of the stage. You need a little bit of a stage. They need to see just a little bit. And sometimes some of the things you're holding or problems you're trying to solve, the solution is in your people, and you hadn't even presented the problem with them to them. You haven't even given them an opportunity to support you. And so now you carrying this sack on your back, and it gets bigger and bigger, and your back hurt, and you're moaning and groaning. And now you're mad all the time, and you think you're mad because it's the work, but you're mad because your load is heavy and your body is tired.
all the way true. So I'm getting ready to pull an audible, and you're going to give me grace, because it's just been sitting in my soul.
Okay.
And because I'm going to ask you a question I didn't tell you I was going to ask you. So
It's fine. It's fine.
So I'm curious on your take, because we are in Black History Month, and there are conversations that I've had with organizational leaders that they want to take the time this month to do something to communicate, like, this culture of belonging and connection to events. And I'm curious, how do you, when you are working with organizations and leaders, and you want them to understand cultural shift that actually allows them to see diverse humans, diverse experiences, diverse perspectives, but being able to celebrate them without being afraid of how it's going to make somebody else feel, but just truly creating a culture where everyone is seen. During a season like this, where there's an opportunity to have those authentic conversations with leaders, what are some things that you tell them, don't do this, and some things that really lead to more authentic
things that I tell them not to do?
Yeah, stuff that don't do this. But then also, what do
you
you
can still
do?
hear me, hopefully. And so one of the things that I tell them not to do. Oh, go ahead. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. Yes. So one of the things that I tell them not to do, as I was listening, I felt myself kind of like bubbling up. I was like, oh, what is she about to say? Because the reality of it is, first they have to find out what their why is, right? Because sometimes what people do is performative. And if you're trying to do something really to say, I see you, but it is performative, the people on the other side know that. They know that it's not genuine. And again, that can cause more harm than help. So if it is true, it should be built into your culture. It's cool to kick it off during Black History Month, but if you only do it during Black History Month, then that could be problematic. If you have diverse cultures, there are like multiple ways to celebrate that. So for example, you might, during Black History Month, you may say, like, these are some things we want to share. If there are people in our organization, let me step back. First, make sure that's what your people want. Let's start there.
Let's start there.
So
let's
start there. Because sometimes people say, like, oh, I should do this. And you have to ask yourself the question, why? Why should you? Is this something that people said they needed? Is this something that people said they were lacking? Or is this something that will make you feel better, right? And so We saw a lot of that in 2020. There were I put the black box on social media, and I do the things, and I make the statement, and I create this position, but nothing else changed. And so if you think that there is cultural harm that is happening within your organization, find out what's the cause of that and what is the fix for it. If it really is about celebrated diversity, then you can ask people to bring the thing that they want to share, right? What is the thing that you, because like I fit into a bunch of categories. I'm a woman, I'm a black person, I'm an educator, I'm a Christian. There are a lot of different things about me, not just this. And so for you to pick this one thing about my identity and decide I want to celebrate identity, then that's actually how you can get caught up in crosshairs. If it really is about celebrating the diversity of everything, diversity of thought, diversity of experiences, the diversity of the ideas and things that they bring to the table, then you ask the questions, and that's how you present it. And how is it related to the work? And so if you are in a place that you're just like, well, what we do is we make copiers, but what we're going to do is we're going to have a Black History potluck. What they got to do
What
with
does
what y'all
what
do
did
with this
that?
job? Why y'all doing it? And so it really is this, like, for ask yourself the why, and then seek counsel of the people that you're working with. Like, hey, this is something that I'm thinking about. I feel really passionate about it. What are your thoughts? And so you may not do that whole staff. There may be trusted people in your organization that you can ask. You may decide to form a quick committee, not a permanent committee, but a quick committee of like, hey, I want to do this. I want this to be embedded in our culture across the board. What do you think this will look like in a way that will be meaningful for you? And if you have diversity, like multiple cultures and multiple experiences, and somebody mentioned earlier in the chat, multiple generations, because that's
Mhm.
also a part of like, how do people show up? You know, what Gen Z does and what the boomer generation do and how they show up work is different. How do you make space for both of them? And so there are multiple ways that people have identities. Their intersectionality is important. And so I would ask a more broad question about how do we honor this, and what ways do you feel honored and not feel honored in this space to show up as your whole self, and then you address it that way, as opposed to saying, oh, it's Black History Month, I should do something for Black people, because that feels performative.
Oh, so you offer the don't and the do, both, and the accountability, because I feel like everything you just shared also just echoes the foundation that you laid for us, right? So understanding, belonging from a place of integrity, really unpacking, how do you create a culture that allows people to feel seen, for them to feel valued. And it's not just attached to 28 days, the second month of the year, but where is this going to live connected to your why?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I can't believe it. We are so, it goes by so quickly. With
Mhm.
all of the nuggets that you have shared, I always ask the leader to identify what is your call to action
Mhm.
for a leader who is listening and they really
Mhm.
want to begin to incorporate a healing centered experience or culture
Mhm.
within their organization? Give them an action step for them to take on in the coming week.
So I'm going to go the long way. I'm going to end with the call, but there are a couple of things that I want to just offer. So in my organization, we use this framework called Connect, Heal, Learn, Build. And so if you remember the words connect, heal, learn, build, I want to give you a couple of things that fit into each of those categories, and then I can do your call to action. So in connection, make sure every person in your community has somebody who truly knows them and that they trust. Create opportunities for them to build communities together. Make sure that your culture reflects the value of the people who make up the culture, not just the value of the leaders. Make sure everybody is recognized and celebrated for their strengths, which means you need to know what their strengths are. And in terms of healing, lead with empathy acknowledge the harm that is caused, whether that harm was caused by you, and sometimes that harm is caused by the systems in which you work. And so they may be outside of your control, but you can name them. And that gives other people the freedom to name them. And collectively, you say, we can acknowledge this is true. How do we work within that? Allow your people to see your humanity. And with learning, learn your community outside the walls of the work. And so, what are some of the things that they do? For those of you who are working with young people, understand their community, because those are the things that come into the walls of where you work. And so, you want to make sure that you have an opportunity to do that. Build your team's capacity for restorative practices, because you are not the only one who could cause harm. Sometimes harm can be caused between people that you lead. And what are the ways that you can have restorative practices in place so that the harm can be acknowledged, healing can begin, and then they can work together to get the job done? And then build with your team. Find ways to incorporate them. Remember, from the definition that I gave, the last thing was they have something to contribute. And so if you are leading from this place where you are holding it all, find places where your team can contribute. And my charge to you is, start with your people. If you cannot tell a story about the people that you lead. And so if you are a senior leader, maybe it's just your team, not your whole organization. If you don't know any part of their story, let this, in the next few weeks, makes time to get with them, to have a conversation. It doesn't have to be a long one, but that you learn something about them that is a part of who they are, and it impacts how they show up at work. It could be something that they like to cook, so they bring in food every day that they cook and they like to share it. It can be something as simple as that, but get to know your people as people, and then begin to ask the questions of what they need, especially if you have an environment that feels like there's tension and stress there. Pop the bubble by asking the question, because they know that you care and you want to know, and then be prepared to respond accordingly.
Yes, yes, and yes. And so you've given us your framework. And so I'm sure people are like, well, how do I follow her? And how do I connect? So tell the people how they can follow you and what's on the horizon for Maggie's Village.
So, one, you can follow us at Maggie's Village LLC on all platforms: Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Our website is maggiesvillagellc.com. We actually are launching an updated website at the beginning of March. And so if you want to reach out and connect with us, you can email us at connect@maggiesvillagellc.com. And so the work that we're doing right now is really consultant work. We are helping leaders build the teams that they want. We are helping leaders to figure out, where are the weak spots in the way that I'm leading, where are the ways that I can leverage the strengths of my team. And sometimes it's just like, I need other eyes to see what I'm not seeing. Where are my blind spots? And so if you are looking for a partner in being able to create belonging in your workplace, to assess your culture, if something feels right but you can't put your finger on it, we'd love to be able to work with leaders who are doing that, especially those who are willing to do the self-work. And so definitely reach out to us if that is something that is on your heart right now, especially in these times that are so challenging, and you're figuring out, I need a thought partnership on how to navigate this. Like, how do I bring up the things that may be not related to our work, but it's impacting how people show up at work? We can work with you and help you do that in a way that is safe and that helps you get results in your organization.
This conversation tonight, we unpacked it, we explored it, we explained it, and got it down to one truth. Belonging is not extra. It's actually essential. What we talked about tonight isn't about softening your leadership. It's actually about strengthening it. When leaders create environments where people feel seen, they feel supported, and also challenged, performance doesn't decline, it actually deepens. Retention improves, and your culture, it stabilizes, and outcomes then they're able to rise. And here's the flip side. When nurturers are not nurtured, the system, it eventually begins to crack and it fails. So your action step for this week, it's simple, but it's powerful. Choose one practice that signals belonging in your space. Maybe it's how you open up the meeting tomorrow. Maybe it's how you respond to stress. Maybe it's actually checking in before you start checking the tasks. Operationalizing care. Hold high expectations. Yep, do both of them. Because when we build environments where people can actually thrive, then communities, they begin to rise. And that's leadership for now. And it's leadership that lasts. So I want you to lean in and be that leader this week. And we'll see you next week. Same time, same place, right here on the flip side.